Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Valerie Ann Johnson, and I am Dean of Arts, Sciences, and Humanities at Shaw University. And today's session is a continued celebration, a part two of our Preservation North Carolina Shelter Series on Estey Hall. We're celebrating 150 years of having Estey Hall available to the public, to the world. And we want to talk a little bit more than just about the building, the structure itself, which is gorgeous, it's Italianate, as it says in this first slide, finest school building in the state. But some of the interesting aspects of Estey Hall is also in how it lived, how it lives today, and who were the participants, who did their activities in Estey Hall, who lived there. And I think it'll be an interesting conversation. We've already had some pre-conversation that has been enlightening, and I'd like to get us started. What you're seeing are some of the earlier images of Estey Hall, and we showed them last time, so we'll go through pretty quickly with these introductory pieces just to get everyone situated. And then what we'll do is have our guests introduce themselves and start our conversation. So this is our first slide. Next. And these are the next few slides are showing Estey Hall in the early years, 1874, as you can see here. Next. And this is a postcard, as you see women walking from the hall. Next slide. And Estey Hall takes its name, it was named after the benefactor who supported education for these recently freed enslaved persons. And as you can see, these were white Northerners, Brattleboro, Vermont, that's a tongue twister. And so these were part of a network of abolitionists and folks who believed in education for these former enslaved persons. And they really wanted women to be educated. And I think this is really important to state that in 1865, Shaw University began. The next year, women came to Shaw University, some as young as, and then girls as 13 years old, to not just have a domestic education, meaning learning the domestic arts, but having a full education so that they could be part of this new rebuilt society. And Shaw University had women attending our institution years before UNC Chapel Hill had women admitted into their full program. It was 1898 when Chapel Hill even graduated someone a woman in a postgraduate degree. Women were graduating from Shaw and contributing way before that time. And Estey Hall was built in order to house these women who came. Next slide. This is the organ one of the organs that's in Estey Hall, Estey organ. And that was where they got the money, the support for this particular, to be able to give money to build Estey Hall. And so this is one organ. Next. And this is the second organ that is also there that reminds us of who contributed and gives us a touch back to our past. And this is in the auditorium. You'll see more slides of this later on, but that's the second Estey organ. And folk were asking, do they work? Well, we're gonna check them out with someone who is an organist a little later on in the year, so that we would be able to say, yes, I'm sure they can be played, but I'd rather a trained organist be the one to touch these pedals and keys. Next. So as you can see from the earlier slides, there was just one building. Now you had the L that is attached. So this is basically the configuration that we have today. Next. And so as you can see, this is again kind of giving you a way of an idea of what Shaw looked like in the early 1900s. Next. That this is the plan, and you can see Estey Hall is in the foreground, if you can see that. And then there are other, this building is no longer here, but we've got Leonard Hall and Tyler that are across the street of, on the other side of the campus. Next. Now this talks about, advertises Estey Hall as a women's dormitory. It also is saying that this is when deferred maintenance, and you know, it's difficult to keep up buildings that are 150 years old. So as time passed, there's a lot of work that has to be done to maintain and keep them. So this is what it was looking like in 63. And next. By 68, there was a fire, and it did some kind of damage, but we didn't lose the whole building, and that is the best way. And it was 97 years old when this happened. Next. And finally, before we get to our guest today, I wanted to show you one of those early residents, Dr. Louise Cecilia Lulu Fleming. And I want to talk about her just for a minute because she is emblematic of the kind of women who stayed in the dorm and who graduated from Shaw University. She came from Florida, and she ended up being one of the first Black women to graduate from Women's Medical College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But before she got there, she had to get grounded in education at Shaw University. She also trained to become a teacher. She taught in public schools. And when she attended Shaw, she graduated as valedictorian in 1885. She became interested in missionary work through the American Baptist Convention, and she served as a missionary to Africa. That is part of what gave her the impetus to return to Shaw, to Leonard Medical School, in order to get trained as a physician. She served in the Congo and sent young people back to Shaw University. And she had a fairly short life, considering, but she was determined to be someone who contributed to the world. And she did so. One of the people who was impressed with Dr. Fleming was William Still. And I mention this because think about Philadelphia in the late 1800s, post-Reconstruction. This woman, who is a graduate of Shaw University, is interacting with people who had, William Still was the father of the Underground Railroad, and he was impressed with her accomplishments and wrote about them in a book that is called Women of Distinction, that was written by a former graduate of Lincoln Medical School who wanted to talk about how great the women were that he knew. And he said, we need to have a tome about Black women and their importance. Well, he would have called them colored women at the time. And so William Still, who is the father of the Underground Railroad, writes about this young woman that he knows, Dr. Louise Fleming. And it takes us back to Shaw University, these connections. Next. And so this is Estey today, and I would like to talk with now some of our guests who are joining us, who will be able to tell us about their experiences at Shaw University. And I'd like to start with, let me get this on, Mrs. Hazel Gibbs, and Mrs. Brenda Jones, and Mrs. Carol Gartrell. Now, I'll start with you all. Just introduce yourselves a little bit, and tell us a little bit about your experiences at Shaw University and what it was like living in Estey Hall. And I will start with Mrs. Gibbs.
Okay. Good afternoon. Um, I lived in Estey Hall as a freshman. We came to Shaw in the fall of 1965 and lived in Estey Hall. My room was on the second floor. And I tell people nowadays when I go in the building that the room was where the elevator shaft is. It was really at the top of the stairs when you came up on the second floor. And I think it's in the area where the elevator now sits. And Olivia, the office down the hall, that wide hallway on the second floor. Um, I don't know who's in that office now. I don't know if it's development, institutional advancement, but there's an
Yes, they have
office
that.
on that second floor that where you can go out on the porch.
Mm-hmm.
And Olivia was lived in that room, and Olivia wasn't able to join us today. But we all of us met, the three of us who are on this call met in 1965, and we are still, excuse me, hanging out together these many years later, and can remember, of course, back. One of the things I can remember is that we had a house mother, and you see, way back in the day, um, you could not leave campus alone. You could not leave campus unless you were escorted by somebody. So your roommate, your good friend, you had to have an escort to leave campus. And I remember Olivia and me going to the Western Union station to pick up a money order. I don't remember the time of the day. I think it may have been the evening, and we were a little scared because back in the day, you always assumed that we were going to misbehave and get sent home, and we were so excited actually to be at college that you didn't want to get sent home. And remember that, and also remember back in the day, again, that when classes were over, you pretty much were expected to be around the dorm and in your room and in the dorm. You could go to the library in the evening to study, and um, and if you didn't, but you had to be in the dorm. The house mother would stand on the porch, on the Estey Hall porch, and to make sure people knew that it was time to come in the dorm at 9 o'clock. That you were not staying out on the street after 9 o'clock. And I remember that front parlor that's now um, named for the lady from Smithfield. That was the place where if you had guests, they could be received. So, we were, and back in that day, there also were no trousers. You couldn't wear trousers out and about. And, but we had this lovely experience and a warm experience. And I, for one, just am overjoyed to see the restoration of Estey because it was a place that housed us. And as a personal note, I have a deceased aunt who was at Shaw way back in the late 20s. So and undoubtedly lived in Estey. And so I have that long familiar connection to Shaw. Carol, you talk now. Unmute yourself. Unmute. You can't, you haven't unmuted yet. We can't hear you. Mm-mm. Okay, Brenda, start talking while she's trying to unmute.
Okay. I laughed at you saying you couldn't wear trousers because we found trench coats that people you had You had shorts on under anything to do the opposite of what you were told you could not do. But I remember Carol and I walking, and I'm not sure if it was while we were in Estey, but I used to walk downtown with Carol, and her legs are longer than mine. And she would walk so fast. I had a very difficult time trying to keep up with her. And I can remember that. But I was on the second floor at Estey Hall as well, near the front. I don't remember exactly. The room was on, if you're facing the building, it was second floor on the left, but it wasn't all the way out to where the porch was. It was like two rooms back. But my room was like a long, narrow room, just because of I guess the way the building was constructed, and when they decided to change some of the rooms in the building, it was like it was a narrow room. It's almost like walking in a hallway to get into the actual room itself. And I had a roommate who ended up leaving at the end, before the end of that year, who was from, I think, New Jersey. So she did not stay the entire time. But my memory was that we could see when people were leaving the campus from Estey. It was like that focal point that you viewed everything that was going in and out of the campus, because everybody came in and out for the most part through the front. So we sort of knew who was going where with, and who they were being chaperoned by, and those kinds of things. And at that time, and it makes us sound like we're much older than in our late 70s, because it sounds like we were in the 30s and 20s and 30s because of all the restrictions. There were a lot of restrictions, but the thing I remember about Estey Hall, the building, were the floors. I always liked those floors, and the floors creaked some. It was a good sound. It's like I can remember walking down that hallway to get to my bedroom, because it was like so far from the stairwell. It was like something about those floors and the way the floors were maintained that just resonate in my memory. Thinking of just not remembering everything about Estey Hall. It just seemed like it was so far from the cafeteria. It felt that way. It wasn't that far, but it felt like it was always so far from the business office, and you had to walk past another building to get to anything. And I remember, why was it so far? But it was at the front of the campus, and so it felt like it was just so far away. But a lot of activities took place out there in the area where the circle is. And people milling around during daylight hours, not at night. But that's my memory of Estey Hall. Carol, can you unmute? You're muted again. It could be the volume on your speaker. She's still trying to find it. Any questions, Dr. Johnson? Anything that might spark some other memories for us?
Well, you can also let us know, what were your course of study? What were y'all majoring in at the time? And then Nakaya and Zaid, who can come into the conversation. If you have some questions of your alums, please ask.
Okay.
And then we will get back to Miss Carol.
Okay. Well, I was the chemistry major.
Oh, sorry. Hey, you went first. Go on.
Okay. I was a chemistry major. When I was in high school, I had gone to governor's school, and I had always wanted to be a pharmacist. And remember, this is back in the 60s. This was at the beginning of the civil rights and integration, marches, sit-ins, all of that. And my mother said, well, you won't be able to get a job as a pharmacist, based on her experience, based on the restrictedness that she had experienced growing up. And so I still loved science. And so I was a chemistry major. Actually, I have never practiced it because I immediately got married and I have ended up, my mother was a teacher. My aunt was a teacher principal, and I ended up declaring I was not going to be an educator, but ended up being an educator. And am a retired person. I ended up working for the Chapel Hill Carver City School District. Actually ended up being their senior executive for HR for 25 years and worked with child development programs and elementary school programs and things of that nature. Hadn't intended to, but that's what I ended up doing.
Okay.
Well, I did not want to go to college. In 1965, when we graduated from high school, a month later, one of my very best friends was killed in Vietnam by a sniper. And I decided I wanted to go into the Air Force. And my mother packed my bags and took me to Shaw and told the Dean of Women, Dr. Elizabeth Cofield, that she does not want to be here. And she put me to work immediately. I was helping people move into the dorm, and I didn't know the dorm myself, but she put me to work. I was busy doing things all the time, and she allowed me to leave campus and go home every week. And then after the first semester, my mother called me one day and said, "Are you ever coming back home?" Because then I stopped going home because I met people. I was enjoying being in college, but I did not want to go to college. I wanted to go into the Air Force. So I sort of learned Estey Hall on the fly. The day I moved in, I learned the building because I was taking people and helping them get to their rooms because that was my job. And we had some of us, I don't know if Hazel, Carol, and Olivia were, but we were ambassadors and were asked to do things and be at different events. And I think that was an outgrowth of trying to keep us involved in what was going on campus and being there. But I was a mathematics major. After deciding what I wanted to be, I guess I went to my strength. I did not want to be an educator, but when I finally decided to become an educator, my mother said, "Well, you've been teaching people all your life." So it's sort of like you finally got there. And as Hazel, I worked for 40 years, and Hazel and I ended up both being in human resources. I retired as associate superintendent in human resources, but I taught for 14 years, taught mathematics for 14 years, had a minor in science. And I worked in the central office for a number of years after being a principal and an assistant principal in a school. It's sort of like I decided to go back to school and get a master's at East Carolina because I was living in Greenville in administration supervision because I thought the principal that I had did not know what he was doing. So it's sort of like, I was like, this guy, he didn't know what he's doing. So anyway, I said, well, let me go. I'm going back to school. And then I ended up being an assistant principal for a couple of years and then principal at a middle
Yes.
school.
So like Brenda, after Shaw, I had a master's degree in guidance and counseling at North Carolina Central, and then a master's degree in library science at North Carolina Central, and then in administration supervision at UNC Chapel Hill, and all but dissertation at UNC Chapel Hill.
Gotcha. Mrs. Gartrell, are you able to, you can hear us?
We can hear you now a little bit.
If you speak
Turn the volume up.
She's on her phone. The volume on her phone is what she's using. Well, go ahead and do that, and let's see what we can hear.
Yes, you have a suggestion?
It's connecting her phone from the computer. If she's having to talk in her phone. So sometimes when you're on Zoom or Microsoft, it automatically connects your audio to your phone. So you can talk like this while you're on the video call. So she has to disconnect her phone from that, and she'll be able to use the laptop or the computer to be able to talk on the computer mic.
There is an arrow next to the computer mic that gives you that choice to see if you can click on it. You just muted yourself. The
Oh,
arrow
yeah.
beside
So
the
that-
microphone.
Right, try that.
He said, try what?
The arrow beside the mute microphone.
The other way to do this would be to just call in. Just call into the Zoom, and then we'll see your face, and you can just talk on the phone. And while that's happening, I do want to bring in Nakaya and Zay to talk a little bit about their experiences, and we're gonna get you, Miss Carol.
Okay, cool. Well, it was a pleasure really hearing everyone's stories, like just hearing from alumni. It really encourages just the morale that I have and the pride that I have for Shaw University. Like just hearing the accolades that y'all have behind Shaw, like that is amazing. Like one of the things I always push for people that are coming after me is like there's so many people that have, attended Shaw that have made amazing things out of themselves. And so it's inspiring just to hear y'all's stories. And one of the things that I think about when I think about Estey Hall is, being a worker there. I'm the student assistant to the 18th president, Dr. Paula Dillard. So I go to the fourth floor almost every day. So it's a routine now, and I find myself always loving and admiring the building in itself. But honestly, the relationships I have created within Etsy is what makes it so prominent for me. I love how professionally I've grown since I've been there. I started working as her assistant when I was a second semester sophomore. And so to see the evolution of my profession since I've been there has really helped me progress as far as, in internships, being able to just put myself out there in the departments that I major in, which is business management and also mass communications. And so I think when you're connected with the people who actually run the university, you're able to really know the structure of it, and you're able to have more influence on the people around you. And so being able to work with Dr. Dillard, Miss Cynthia, which is the executive assistant to the president, they really have helped me just put myself out there and take advantage of the opportunities that Shaw have. Being that Shaw is a private university, we do have a smaller student body, but I always say, like, we may be small in size, but we are big on excellence. And I've seen Shaw continue to produce excellence, and people like myself and even Zaid. I think it's kind of ironic that me and Zaid are actually on this phone call because we hang out almost every day. So we're you really all do remind us of each other, because we always call each other like, like we're gonna be like this when we get older. And so when I see this, it really does inspire me. But Estey Hall has played a huge part in my professionalism and just my womanhood. Seeing all these women in these bigger positions, I'm like, man, if they can, I can. And so I always like emphasize that. Another thing that I love about the history of Estey, which we started off with, is that we are the first to house African American women. And so when I think about stuff like that, I say, well, I'm technically a part of history. You know what I mean? When you hear about, okay, how did women get started in education? How did African American women get started? I can say that I was a part of that movement. And for people like Ella Baker, who had started things like SNCC, these products that come out of Shaw is what really influences the next generations to come. And so I never take for granted that not only do I get the privilege and pleasure to work at Etsy every day, I'm reminded constantly of just the quality that Etsy has produced in women like you all on this call and people like myself.
Thank you, Nakaya. Zaid, what can you say to us? And before you say something, Miss Gartrell, are you able to connect with us? We still can't hear you.
Sometimes hanging up and reconnecting, would that give that a try to see if that would help? I don't know.
Yes, okay. So while we wait for Miss Carol to come back, Zaid, tell us something about your experiences and what things happened there that made Estey special to you.
So when I first stepped foot in Estey, the first thing I recognized was the floors. I think the creaks in the floors remind me a lot of home, because like in my grandmother's house and both my grandmother's house, we always had creak floors. So like I knew, it got to the point where I knew where not to step, because if I didn't want my grandma or my mom to hear me, I knew not to step to the right because I was gonna hear a creak in the floor. But that's part of history. You know, I think the creaks in the floor are also a sign of how many people have walked in and out of Estey, how many people that, how many entrepreneurs, women, men, you know, of colored people who have really built a foundation in Estey. Now we have new floors, so we gotta, you know, retrain the floors to show how many people are walking in and out. But Estey is such a beautiful building. I personally like looking at Estey at night, just seeing the lights and how the city lights just like really shines on Estey, because it is a beautiful historical building. My first time actually sitting and having a chance to really admire Estey was actually my junior year, when I had a chance to work with our digital manager in Estey. And just looking at all the rooms, I always asked myself, like, I wonder how many women stayed in this dorm, because it's only like, now it's only 4 rooms on each side. So I'm like, it's no way all these women was living in this dorm. But again, times were different, so they made things work. You know, I would say like Shaw period has granted me a lot of opportunities to be in the seat that I am today. I've opened up more, I've matured a lot, I've understood what it is that I want to do as a student, as a businesswoman, you know, and also a future alumni of Shaw University. I've had great opportunities to work with our president this year, you know, speaking more and working more with our president. So I'm more hands-on and working in the Estey building. I just love the building so much, obviously, because it was dedicated to women, but it is one of the oldest buildings here in Raleigh and downtown Raleigh. And you have many people that want to know the story about Estey. You have many people who have their own personal stories about Estey. The reason we're here in this meeting, you know, because it holds a lot of values and memories. Also, I love the conference room. It shows mostly all of the presidents that were over the institution, you know, from men to women, you know, and I feel like it's a great transition to see of how Estey has grown. Even looking at the presentation, I never knew that Estey caught on fire, you know, and that's crazy, because it's just like, that building is that strong. It survived a fire. It survived a tornado, you know, and I think that those stories alone shows how powerful and how much strength that we have as a university, that even Mother Nature couldn't tear this down, because us as a whole are are so, in a way, stuck together and glued together that it's no way you can tear our history down. I feel, I know many of us, like many of us, and like Nakaya said, we have a connection with that building, and many of us also have, I had an opportunity to actually sit and work and feel the energy of the people who previously worked there, who are now working there and building history as well. So I will always encourage people and myself to love Estey, love to any other building, Tupper, because these are buildings of great structure, of memories that alone we
This
couldn't.
meeting is being recorded.
These are memories that we could never, we could never forget. It's so many stories, there's so much love there, and Estey has really shone light. Just the building alone has really shone light on Shaw University.
And
One of
also,
the things I would say is that one of the things that we did love were the hallways. On the second floor, the hallways were so wide
Yeah.
that you would congregate, and we would congregate in
yeah.
the hallways. And I'm like you, just talking about the floors, those plank floors, absolutely gorgeous. And when I come on campus now, the place I like to go, I like to go all the way up to the cupola, all the way up to that the highest point.
Yes.
Um,
It's
I don't
hot in
know,
there.
it is, but you go out there and you can see all over
Everything.
Raleigh. You can see everything. You can
Beautiful.
absolutely see everything. And then the thing that the memory, that the other memory I have is, that bench across the campus, across the parking lot. I remember sitting out there on a Saturday afternoon when there wasn't a football game. Football game, we would walk down to Chambers Park. But
Mm.
and back in our day, the president's house, Missouri Hall, was now on that lawn.
It faced us.
That faced us.
Can you
And
hear me now?
yes,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
can.
Okay. Well, before I get lost, am I being intrusive if I want to speak now
No,
that
ma'am,
I'm
go
No,
ahead.
not
Oh,
at
you're
all.
fine.
okay?
Go
My
ahead.
connection with Estey Hall, my freshman year, was really not my first connection to the university because my family lived on Bloodworth Street. It was walking distance to the campus. And my older sister, there are 8 of us, but the one next to me going up, Brenda and I used to come on campus. That was our after school. When we were in high school, we came on campus and we participated in the protests and demonstrations. And we had meetings with the strategy people who were planning the marches and demonstrations. We probably had no business over there, but that was our after school. So my parents passed when we were children, and we had to split up and go live with different relatives. So I had been living with different relatives from the 10th grade and 11th grade. And when I got admitted to Shaw, I was living with some cousins, the Malones. That's the Vernon Malone family on South Street. And that was even closer to the campus. But after the first semester, I moved on campus freshman year, and that was Estey Hall experience. And my memory of Estey is similar to my roommates, but what really still stands out in my mind about Estey was that it was so bright. The yellow is, we really caught the sun on that side of Estey, and it was always bright. I can't remember like a cloudy day, because when the sun hit that side, it's just all yellow, just very bright. So it was so inviting to be in there because of that. And then the major memory that I have is that the Dean of Women, as I recall Elizabeth Cofield being, her office was downstairs on the main level. And, you really pretty much had to be inspected if you were going to be leaving campus because of the requirements. And, nobody was, I guess, bold enough to go against the expectations of how you were supposed to look and dress and act as long as Dean Cofield was there. And that was a major memory for me because I don't remember our being in Estey Hall without the Dean of Women being right there. Things were pretty closely scrutinized in those days. And that to me stands out most because we moved from Estey into that 9-story women's residence hall from there. So we didn't have as much time in Estey as some of the other classes actually. Wasn't that the freshman year that we moved on campus, the end of the freshman year, or was it the beginning of second year, Hazel?
We were in Estey our freshman year. In the sophomore year, you forgot our shotgun house that we lived
Yeah, the
in
house across the street.
I wasn't in there. I wasn't a part of that.
You weren't in the house with us?
Never, no. I knew you all lived there. You and Olivia. Brenda, did you live in the house?
Yes.
Oh, I don't remember. That was probably before I moved on campus, evidently.
That was after we moved out of Estey Hall. We went across the street.
It was.
There was a select group of good
I was not in
students
the.
who were
I was
moved
not in the select group.
to the house. I don't know how they decided who would move to the house.
So it was Olivia. Olivia was on the bottom bunk. I was on the top bunk. Branch, Brenda, there what?
I was in the
Janet
back
Bowser,
Annette
Allen, Vera
Allen.
Allen was. We had a senior woman was our house mother.
I wasn't in the house.
You
Okay.
were.
No.
I always thought you were. And
Nope.
the thing about Shaw at that time was not only did you know one another, but you got to know everybody's family.
Oh yeah. Well,
you got to know Aunt Sarah. My mother died the first week I was at Shaw,
unbelievable.
and I went home for the service, but there wasn't any question I was coming back to school. I was, because I was excited to be at school. Both Carol and I, on scholarship and what have you.
Yeah.
So there's no question. And so my Aunt Sarah would come and go. Olivia's mother would come, and they come and bring us. Look, they come and bring us baskets of food with fried chicken and potato salad.
They always had food.
Yes, and they would come to homecoming. They would be so dressed up, and oh, it was part of the memory too. Like you said, it's the people, it's the building itself, the floors, the wide hallways, the light as she's talking about, but the relationships that you built with people in the building, the relationships that we built with one another. Because look at us, these many years later, we met in Estey Hall, and these many years later, here we are, still hanging on to one another, still close.
Yeah. And
we're gonna run out of time, ladies,
wow.
and I know because our young ladies have to go to a class.
Yes, they do.
So I'm sorry, Dr. Johnson. That's just.
No, I was just
Please
take a minute
me.
to show
question.
the last part of the slides because it brings us into the present and it'll allow our two young ladies to speak a little bit.
I wasn't done.
Okay, I'm gonna let you finish while we bring up those slides. Go ahead, Miss Gartrell.
Okay, because my family was all over the place, when people got ready to go home for holidays, I went home with Brenda. Brenda's family really became my family. And that's another reason that the four of us have been as close as we are. My 4 years, there was a testing and placement office that I ended up working in because I was in too many things. I was a cheerleader. I was going with my English instructor, Mrs. Maves, over to the Duke Symphony to play in the orchestra. I played viola. And student body activities, I was in too many things and lost my scholarship one semester. It was actually the last semester of my junior year. So I had to take on a work study job, and I worked in test and measurements with Ms. Velma Clark. But I was able to find out so much more about the credentials and the process of people coming into the university. And they did a lot in those days with career placement. And I remember taking a career interest inventory that said that according to my interests, I would make a great dean of students. Well, I didn't follow that path, but I did major in English. And one of the major memories is Dr. Justine Everett, who taught humanities in the Lennon Auditorium. He was very strict and very knowledgeable. You dare not go to class unprepared. But while I didn't go the route of being a dean of women, I was a counselor. I got a master's in counselor education and higher education at North Carolina State University. And I worked as director of, well, first as a counselor in Upward Bound, and then director of Upward Bound and Special Services on the campus. Really did 2 tours of duty on campus. I went back to Wake County Public Schools for about 10 years. And my last tour of duty at Shaw was from 89 to 99 as director of the Counseling Center. And that gave me the responsibility of freshman orientation, which I just loved because we always had a theme for the season. The very first one, I think, was Hold Up the Light. We encouraged students to hold up the light of those who had come before them. We had T-shirts always that went with the theme. And one T-shirt I remember was, there was no you before Shaw U. And on the back of that T-shirt, it was, lack of knowledge of your history will make you a slave. We did things that had the students buy into the legacy of the university. And that to me was the best job I've ever had.
Thank you. We're gonna see a few slides as we end that bring us to the contemporary times. You can see the cupola, that part in the top, the very top, the 5th floor, that privileged people get to go up to. Next slide.
I never went there.
Mary Frances.
Yes, sorry. Let me stop. Let me try that again.
Uh-oh. But what we'll end up with is seeing it in its current, the most current iteration today, and that is as a community space. So that might be, you all might recognize that entry point. There are different entry points, but that's the main one that we use now. Next slide. And there are those floors that they were talking about that were refinished.
Try that again. Sorry, everybody. So what is doing? Let's see. Oh, gracious. Got there.
Well, as we're working on that, Nakaya, do you have, because I know you all are getting ready to go, do you have a couple of things that you could share with us?
Yes, I guess as far as like present day goes, I think one of the things
And you can just keep running them, the rest of the slides, while Nakaya talks. This is
okay.
just Estey today.
Okay. Yes, yes. So one of the things that I do admire most about Estey Hall today, present day, is the conference room that we have mentioned before. I think it really does hold the presidential feel and the importance of what Estey Hall is today. I've had a lot of interviews in there, a lot of meetings in there. I've been able to engage with the board of trustees there. It was my first time where I had to dress in a full body suit there. And so I think that, when I think about memories and, the way that Estey Hall has impacted me, I just think about the excellence. I really do. I think about those rooms that you can walk into and you feel the power, you feel the education of, you know, your ancestors that were educated there. And you just want to be a part of it. And so when I think about just what present day Etsy is and how often we talk about the building and how important it has played a huge part in our legacy just here at Shaw University and in Raleigh in general. You know, it's something to be grateful for, because we are not only being told the history of it, but we're making it as well. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful for this call, the engagement. I've enjoyed the laughs, but most importantly, I really enjoyed how Estey Hall has impacted when I didn't even exist in this world, and how it is going to continue to exist as we continue to move forward. I think one of like the biggest things that I always say is, you know, legacy starts with you being a leader. Legacy starts with you wanting to pave the way for other people to come after you. And so I just want to give a huge shout out to all the ladies on the call, because you all are a part of why we step where we step today. So I thank you all so much for being the women that you are. And I hope me and Zaid and other people in our generation can continue just to pass the torch.
Thank you, Nakaya. Zaid, if you could give us some remarks before y'all have to go off to class, and then we will give our alumni the last word after you.
Well, I just want to say thank you as well to Miss Brenda, Miss Hazel, and Miss Carol, because hearing the stories really helped me know like I'm at the right place, you know, and and I always say as well, like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So it's good to see women who stood before me and actually made history on our campus and still still are good friends. Like I know Nakai gonna forever be my road dog, and I pray that we reach the mark that you guys have, you know, and I love that. And I love that, you know. So I just want to say thank you again for just sharing your stories, because hearing your stories also helps me to know that I can be whatever I want to be. When I step in a room, I know I have it. And it's all because of Shaw University and the leaders that were here before me as well. So thank you.
And this is the Zaid is the Student Government Association president. She didn't say that.
I'm sorry. Yes. I
Talking
am.
about leadership, and Nakaya also has been serving in a variety of leadership roles on the campus. So we thank them both. And you can stay on, but I really encourage you to go to class.
It's been a pleasure to meet
Yes,
you.
go to class.
We'll be
Yes.
on
Nice meeting
campus.
you, ladies. Nice meeting you,
Thank
ladies.
you all so much, ladies.
We'll be on campus at homecoming, so we'll be looking for us. When you see us, you
Yes.
be sure to
Yes,
speak now.
ma'am.
Yes, we
Yes.
will.
You be
We
sure to
will.
speak.
Yes,
Continue to make us proud.
yes, ma'am.
Will
Absolutely.
do.
Yeah.
Will do.
Thank
Definitely.
you.
Thank you so much. So, alums, last words rather, to leave us with.
Wow.
I give the floor to Carol since she had less time than anyone.
Well, like I said before, Shaw was a part of me before I was a student at the university. And because of the time that I spent working there, even after graduation, between Wake County Public Schools and Shaw University, I was very much prepared for graduate school. You know, people always said, well, you know, you didn't go to a major school, so you won't be prepared. But let me tell you, my preparation at the university made my graduate work easy. I was definitely prepared. And people were amazed at how well read we were and how well we wrote. One instructor said to me, "You love to write, don't you?" But State had such a wealth of Black history publications down in the stacks. I would get lost in there, and that really gave me all the documentation that I needed to support the positions that I took in the papers that I wrote. So it was one thing students need to really know and believe is that after Shaw University, you can excel anywhere.
Thank you. And what was your major again?
My undergraduate major was English because it was easy for me, actually. And then my graduate work was student personnel in higher education. And then I went back after graduation and took some more courses for certification for Wake County Public Schools so I could become a counselor on the secondary level in Wake County.
What I'm sure has come through that many people should appreciate is that you all didn't stop learning. You didn't stop your education. It looked like as soon as you were done with something else, no matter what life brought you, you were doing the next thing and then the next thing. And I think that's important for young people to realize that you don't stop learning. It's a lifetime journey.
Yes,
And
it
you
is.
exemplify that. And I appreciate y'all coming on, giving us a little insight into Estey, but more importantly, telling your story, at least a part of your story. So I have a feeling we're going to hear more from the three of you, and we'll add Olivia. I think what I'm hearing is another roundtable discussion with the four of you.
Anytime.
We want the tea.
Well, the thing about us is that Shaw continues to be part of us.
Yes, always.
I tell people all the time, because I live in the Durham Chapel Hill area, that North Carolina Central doesn't need me, UNC Chapel Hill doesn't need me, but Shaw needs me and needs my resources.
Yes.
And so they get my resources because that's where my heart is. I go basketball games, football games, come to campus when I can.
I never felt that connection to North Carolina State University because I was in graduate school during a time when they really did not want Blacks there. In fact, at commencement, the speaker had the nerve to say they wanted the alumni of State to give more so that they could determine who could and could not come to State. I really felt like standing up, taking off my cap and gown and walking out, but I had said to myself, I'll be back to do a doctoral program. Never did, but it makes such a difference because when I get mail from North Carolina State now, it's like, oh yeah, I forget that I went there because there was no connection other than to excel academically so that I could complete the degree.
And so as we wrap up, and I thank you all for giving us a few more minutes, I'm really impressed by the narrative that you've given us based on your connection through a singular building, a wonderful building, and a building that resonates throughout our campus. And it is something that I think is important to preserve, to maintain. And I hear from you the reason why it's important to maintain and preserve. It's not just the building. It's not just the beauty of Estey. It's the students who were associated with it.
A monument of experiences.
Yes, a monument of experiences. And that is a good way for us to wrap up. We're at time. I thank you so much for taking the time today.
On behalf of Preservation North Carolina, thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories. It was wonderful.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys.